I'm Dr. John Dabach, and I answer your questions. Let's jump into the email. Dear John, my partner says I'm too sensitive and I take things personally, but from my perspective, he's constantly dismissive and critical. I've started questioning my own reality, like maybe I am the problem. How do you know if you're actually too sensitive or if you're being worn down? Emily in Seattle, Washington. Emily, this is a really important question because when you're describing this, right? When you describe this, it sits right at the intersection of emotional reality and psychological distortion. And if you're getting this wrong, you either become defensive and impossible to be with, or you slowly lose your sense of self trying to make someone else comfortable. So let's cut through the noise. The phrase, you're too sensitive, is one of the most overused and misused lines in relationship. Now, here is the scary part. Sometimes it's true. A person can be overly reactive, interpret neutral things as attacks, and expect their partner to walk on eggshells. But just as often, it's used as a weapon to avoid accountability. It becomes a way to shut down feedback instead of engaging with it. So the real task here isn't deciding which label fits you. The real task is understanding the pattern between you and your partner, because sensitivity by itself is not the problem. It's how that sensitivity interacts with your partner's behavior that determines what's actually going on. So let's start with your experience. You're saying he's dismissive and critical. Now that matters. Dismissiveness erodes safety, it just kills it. Criticism kills connection. If those things are happening consistently, then your reactions aren't coming out of nowhere. They're responses to a repeated emotional environment. And when someone lives in an environment where their thoughts or feelings are brushed off or picked apart, they start to become hyper aware. They scan more, they react faster, not because they're broken, but because their system is trying to protect them. So, right away, I want to challenge the idea that your sensitivity is the root issue. It might not be. It might be the result of being in a relationship where you feel invalidated. Now, here's the part where I'm going to push you a bit. Just because your partner is dismissive or critical doesn't automatically mean every reaction you have is accurate or helpful. Two things can be true at the same time. He can be contributing to an unsafe emotional environment, and you can be reacting in ways that escalate things or make resolution harder. So instead of asking, am I too sensitive? The better question is, what is actually happening in our interactions? Here's how you figure that out. Look for patterns, not isolated moments. Everybody's got isolated moments. If you bring something up and he regularly minimizes it, he regularly rolls his eyes, tells you you're overreacting, and then turns it back on you, that is not you being too sensitive. That is a partner you can't tolerate, right? Because he can't tolerate emotional feedback. If you find yourself constantly explaining why your feelings make sense just to get basic acknowledgement, that's not a you problem. That is a dynamic problem. On the other hand, if he gives you space, if he listens, if he tries to understand, and you still find yourself escalating, assuming the worst, or needing constant reassurance, then yes, your sensitivity might be running too hot. But from what you wrote, I'll just be honest, it doesn't sound like that. This sounds like a feedback loop where he's dismissing, you react, and then he labels your reaction as the problem. And over time, you start doubting your own perception. That's what it sounds like. That's where this gets dangerous. Because once you start questioning your own reality, you become easier to control, much easier to silence, and much more likely to tolerate behavior that doesn't actually work for you. That's how people slowly lose themselves in relationships. So let me give you a very clear way, or at least try to give you a very clear way to test this. When you bring something up, does your partner move toward understanding or does he move away from it? That's it. If he moves toward understanding, even imperfectly, then you have someone to work with. You have something to work with within the relationship. If he consistently moves away, if he deflects, minimizes, or even criticizes you for having the feeling in the first place, then the issue is probably not sensitivity. I say probably because you're not my client, you're not my patient, I don't know for sure, but that's my guess. The issue is that your emotional experience is not being respected. Now, let's talk about what to do, because insight without action, it's not going to change anything. First, you need to stop arguing about whether you're too sensitive. That conversation goes nowhere. It's a trap. Don't do it. Instead, anchor yourself in something much simpler. This is how I feel, and I need you to understand what's happening between us. That's it. You're not asking him to agree with your interpretation. You're asking him to engage with your experience. Second, set a very clear boundary around dismissal. Not an ultimatum, not a threat, but a boundary. When I share something that's bothering me and it gets dismissed or turned into me being the problem, I shut down. And I'm not willing to keep having conversations like that. That's what a boundary sounds like. Then follow through. If he dismisses, you disengage calmly, not dramatically, but consistently, because right now the pattern continues because it works for him. He gets to avoid discomfort and you end up questioning yourself instead of holding him accountable. Third, pay attention to how you feel after interactions, not just during them. After. After a healthy conversation, even a hard one, you should feel some level of clarity or connection. After an unhealthy one, you feel confused, small, or like you did something wrong just for speaking. That emotional residue is data. That's information. Trust it. Now, I'm going to say something very clearly, a little plainly. If you stay in a dynamic where your reality is constantly questioned, you're going to lose confidence in yourself and who you are. You're going to become more anxious, more reactive, and ironically, more sensitive over time. Not because that's who you are, but because you're being worn down. And the longer that goes on, the harder it is to trust your own instincts again. So don't minimize what you're experiencing. At the same time, stay honest with yourself. Your goal is not to prove that you're right and he's wrong. Your goal is to create a relationship where both people can express themselves without being dismissed or attacked. That requires effort from both sides, but it starts with you refusing to accept a narrative that automatically makes you the problem every single time you have a feeling. So here's your answer. You're not too sensitive simply because someone says you are. You're too sensitive if your reactions are consistently disproportionate in a relationship where your partner is actually showing up with care and openness. But if your partner is dismissive and critical, then your sensitivity may be a completely reasonable response to an unreasonable environment. And the solution is not to toughen up. The solution is to address the dynamic directly and see if it changes. If it doesn't, then you have a much bigger decision to make about whether this relationship is actually healthy for you or not. And that might be a possibility. If you have a question you want me to answer, there are directions in the description below on how to send that my way for my team and I to consider it for this show. And don't forget to like and subscribe.